Welcome to All Worn Out. I'm your host, Warren Meredith. On the show today, Ashley Newall. He's a longtime member of the Ottawa music community, and he's put on fantastic events over the years, hosted open mics, recorded original music, been a part of some of the best cover bands the city's had to offer, and right now, Ashley's displaying his colorized photographs at Irene's for his vernissage. Let's get into it now with Ashley Newall. Hi, everybody. Welcome to All Worn Out. It's a podcast about music. It's a podcast about what you're passionate about. And it's a podcast about what our guest is passionate about. We are lucky, thrilled, excited, over the moon to have the very cool, eclectic, brilliant, experienced, suave debonair, artistic man of the people.
Like the sound of that last part especially. Thank you.
He is Ashley Newall. Ashley, how are you today?
Pretty good. Well rested. I had a good nap. Had a nice dinner. Sens are playing, so that's always a good day when it's a game day.
I know, we're missing it right now.
That's all right. We'll catch the second and third.
Exactly. And it's like, I'm nervous these days when I watch because I really think they deserve to do well this year. And I haven't necessarily felt that way in the past couple of years.
I felt it last year.
Like you wanted them to succeed, eh?
Yeah, but it's funny you mention that because I stopped watching full games because it's kind of stressful. So with baseball, it's more chill, right? And I change the channel when the other team's up and change it back when the Jays are up. But with hockey, it's much more dramatic and there's, injuries and all that kind of stuff. And, like the last game, the refs kind of decided the game. That's upsetting. But I've gotten into Sen's Twitter as something innocuous to scroll.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm into Sen's Twitter, I feel that I should be watching the games. And as a result as well, I've started watching my first podcast, which was followed quickly by this podcast, which I've been watching. And I've only started watching podcasts this autumn. And the other podcast I've been watching is called Locked On Sens.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah. And it's really high quality. The guys are great. They know their stuff. They make me feel better after the Sens lose. So I'm questioning, my current policy of actually watching the games since, we've lost as many as we've won. But we'll see how it goes.
Boston fires their coach today.
Yeah.
Their record barely different than ours. So I'm
the women, by the way, are switching this off right now.
Oh, they'll wait. Okay. They'll be,
Actually, many women obviously love this.
Yeah, fair.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, when I started this podcast, it was originally planned to be about music and hockey.
Oh.
But I legitimately just couldn't find enough people with hockey, whereas I was swamped by musicians.
Right.
I announced the podcast in July and legitimately 21 people I did 21 episodes in July. And it was just mostly dudes.
Funnily enough, most of my music pals in Ottawa, surprisingly, aren't into hockey.
Huh.
Which, music and hockey go together. Like you've got Blue Rodeo, Rio Statics, they're big hockey guys. But yeah, if I ever want to watch a hockey game, I have to do it with one of my non-musical friends.
Okay.
In town. So.
All right. Fair enough.
That's all about it.
So, Ashley, I think if I'm correct, if I rewind the clock back just a couple years.
Yeah, 10 years.
I'm going back to the Lunenburg.
Yes.
Was it called the Lunenburg Pub?
It was called the Lunenburg Pub and Bar.
Okay.
I think there was no it was kind of pretentious, I suppose. But Lunenburg Pub is, that's what.
I love that place.
It was awesome.
And I love those memories as well. Just so good. And I think I was of a pure mindset when it came to the music industry and what I was doing and what could be done and all those things. I think I look back and it's not naivety necessarily, I was just a little bit pure, a little bit less tainted by by what would come later. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, I mean, you got really serious about music.
Yeah.
And so did I, like in the late 90s and in the aughts in particular, in terms of original music. Some songwriter as well, of course. That put me through the ringer and, and changed me in good ways, and I've evolved and so forth. Now what was the name of the band again you were in? You mentioned
Ginger Fox.
Ginger Fox. Was that with Ryan Wheatley?
Exactly. And you're very close with Jay Colson, who eventually would take over what I call stewardship of Ryan Wheatley and take him under his wing and take him to the next place in music where he was going to go. Jay's an incredibly talented vocalist, like one of top tier in this city, man.
So I played in two bands with Jay. I played in a quartet with Jay and with Ryan Wheatley called Brown Paper Bag. So we were doing top 40 covers, mostly at the Hart and Crowns, but some other places as well. And an incredible band. And not only is Jay an incredible singer, one of the best in the city, in my view, he's also an incredible drummer. And for the musicians watching, he can telegraph a change coming up like nobody else I've ever played with. So the middle eight's coming up because he's just leading you to it with his playing. And he's also tipping off the audience that something's coming up. Now that band was also with Eric St. Cyr.
Bridget as well, or was that years ago?
Bridget, she was in the band when I first started, and she played St. Paddy's Days with us.
All right.
But Ryan Wheatley, he was, one of the rotating lead guitar players in that band. Loved playing with him. Amazing, wonderful guy, incredible player. So going back to the Lunenburg pub. So you guys always got out a great crowd. And that was for my Battle of the Band series called Play for the Pot.
Yep.
And I believe you guys got to the finals. You may have even won it.
No, we got to the finals, but we lost to a duo. He was playing on a jambo box or whatever what do you call those things where you sit?
I know what you mean.
You sit on the box and you hit it. Well, they beat us. And then afterwards, it was hilarious. They came walking down the street and he looked at us and he laughed at us. And me and Ryan were like, what? What? And he was like, haha, we beat you. And I was like, you totally did. Congratulations, just being cool. But it was like, they rubbed soot in our face and it just hurt, man. But
people definitely got more competitive than was intended.
Oh, but that's always going to happen.
It is. And, that's the nature of humanity. But that was an incredible run at the Lunenburg. And, even back then, meeting you for the first time, I knew instantly that you got it. You get it, which is to say that it's all about the community. It's all about Ottawa's music community in particular, which is a beautiful, wonderful thing. I grew up north of Toronto. I dabbled, shall we say, in the Toronto industry scene for a hot minute in the early 90s when everybody was getting signed in the wake of Bare Naked Ladies. They were the Canadian Nirvana. They were the ones who busted down the door for everybody else. So everybody got signed in the early 90s, and then everybody got dropped in the late 90s. But the point being, I came to Ottawa for Carleton, and I recognized that the musicians in the music scene were much more like me than the folks in Toronto. And Ottawa's been home ever since, coming up on 30 years for me here. And so I recognized instantly that you were a community guy, and loved your performances. One of my favorite pictures from that whole run is of your band. I won't describe the picture. Maybe I'll tell you about it afterwards. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
You weren't doing anything silly. It was
okay,
just,
good.
It was just the scene. There was the audience members who were doing,
okay, awesome.
Something intriguing.
Awesome. I like it.
Yeah. So the Lunenburg years were amazing. And then Lunenburg closed and I moved to, it's sold and the new owners had a different vision than I did of the music program there. And so I moved on and played for the Pot, then moved to Zaphods for a year. After that, I went to Live on Elgin. But during the Zaphods year, I met Mike Raymond.
Aha. Yes.
So I've been watching the episodes of All Worn Out where there's people that I know. And with Mike Raymond, I don't know if you know about this about him, but he's historically speaking anyways, a little enigmatic. By little, I mean very.
Yeah.
And so to get him on this show, and to get him talking, about his life and about his career, what I thought was a great catch for you. And I really enjoyed that. And he's a wonderful guy. And he's another community guy, right? Like he's all about building up the community. He's doing sound at Targ. And of course he's just a,
underrated talent, and another one of these Ottawa talents that just should be known by so many people in so many places. And All Worn Out is proudly included bands from Toronto. We've included bands from Pembroke and from Peterborough and the surrounding areas. But yes, my heart is in Ottawa and always has been, even though I was not born, but lived in an hour outside of town. And I was new to living in Ottawa when I was in Ginger Fox. I was new to the city life in general. And I had lived in Toronto only briefly, and it ate me alive. I went there for theater school, and it just destroyed me within 6 months.
Yeah, Toronto's not for me either.
Yeah, it ate me alive. Now, I've since realized, I've gone back there. I've worked with Taming Sari in Toronto with our producer, and some people have said, why didn't you record in Ottawa? And it is a hard question to answer, except that this producer heard something in my voice that others never suggested. And he suggested to me that I do Southern rock and that I go that route.
Wow.
And then he convinced my band that was the correct choice.
Right.
And I was doing alternative before. And he was like, I want you to try this route.
Right. That makes absolute sense.
He's an expert. He's a producer in the field of classic rock. And, he studied under the people who worked with Zeppelin and the people that worked with the Black Crowes and all that kind of stuff. He's on tour right now in England with the Sheepdogs. So, when people ask, it's just we found that person that worked with us.
Yeah. And if they're excited about your stuff, you definitely want that person producing you.
Yeah. And so I hear about Dean Watson all the time in Ottawa. And I'm like, yes, an incredible musical mind, that you'd love to work with. By no means do I suggest any different, by working outside of the city, but I do tell bands all the time, find a producer. I do suggest this to people.
Right. I was too much of a control freak for a producer, which was definitely, not the best thing probably for my career. Also being a perfectionist in my recording artist career, which was mostly in the 90s and in the aughts. I put out my last CD of new stuff, in 2012, and I put out a best of called Greatest Misses in 2015. But I've got a new single coming out, man.
What?
Yes.
No way.
Yes. And it's looking as though I'll be mixing it with Dean Watson.
See, how do I predict stuff? I
don't know. So Dean is like family to me. I've known Dean basically since I got to town. I go to his, I hang out with his family for, around Christmas and stuff like that. And so, so he's got an interesting studio out in Buckingham, which I believe he calls Buckingham Palace.
Nice.
And it is a bit of a folly, the place. It was built by somebody rather eccentric. And it's got all these nooks and crannies and then of course there's the giant hot tub in the smack dab in the middle of the studio. Where somebody finally eventually filled up and got in and sang like a lead vocal take. Sitting in. But, Dean's awesome. Back in the day, we had, Sound of One Hand studio. There was, I think, Distortion, I could never really afford studios. I went to Sound of One Hand and recorded some beds basically, and they sounded great. I think it was reel to reel back then. So we're talking like 98, I think it was 97, 98. And that's, obviously with the digital now, studios are, much fewer and further between. And as well, they ain't cheap. And
God, no.
And that's actually why I'm not doing records anymore, because I can't afford to record, and I never learned how to record myself, which was a big mistake. But new single. So it was done live off the floor a couple of years ago. We've cleaned up the tracks. My bass player, Adam Fogo, and I, Jack McGregor is the drummer. The name of our act is Newall and the Gang.
Love it.
And so early next year, at some point next year, winter or spring, we'll be coming out with a new single called Cooped Up Life, and a B-side, which is called In a Lump. So if In a Lump, sounds better after mixing, then that'd be the single, but it'll probably be Cooped Up Life.
I love it that we're getting into the single first album talk here, because it's, of course, a recurring topic on All Worn Out. So singles versus albums. So like you said, it is just ridiculously expensive to record, and if you want to record with quality.
Yeah.
A lot of bands, including my own in the past, including Ginger Fox, tried to record themselves. And like you said, you regret not learning to record. I'll tell you something. Being good at recording doesn't necessarily mean you're a good musician, and vice versa. Like, there are talents involved with recording, and I found that out. I've watched and worked with now several different engineers, producers, and they're different, and there's different levels to it, and there's different ears involved.
Right.
What's being heard or without ever being played, very intriguing. Very intriguing, because all of a sudden they'll look at you and they'll say, yeah, but what if you did this, 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 and that? Did you hear that?
Right.
And you'll go, kind of. And you'll go again, you'll go, fuck, it's exactly what is there. You know what I mean? Right. In terms of hooks, in terms of experience, what I'll say is 1,000 albums, you start to learn more than anybody else could learn by doing 5 or 10 of their own. You know what I mean? So you might record 5, 10 of your own albums, but you're still 1,000 behind this person who's dedicated their life to just capturing you perfectly.
I have actually, I had a minute when I was producing. So I haven't, I don't know how to record myself like professionally, but I do have a little Tascam. Is it Tascam? No, it's it's like the old Tascam Tate 4 tracks. It's the same size, but it's actually a Zoom. It's a 24 track. Now I've only figured out so far how to use 8. That keeps me honest. And so that's what the new single and B-side were recorded on.
Is it live off the floor?
Yes.
How, again, how do I know this stuff? But what I would say again to people who want to record albums, record live off the floor.
Oh, yeah.
It's incredibly hard, but you will save massive amounts of money, and your band's going to kick ass. And witnessing Taming Sorry, I wasn't singing with them. I can't claim to do it. But witnessing my bandmates go live off the floor in the studio was fucking insane, man. And it just riled me up. And it's so amazing to see that connection that you've drilled into each other.
Well, that's how you get the groove. Like even the Stones, like way back in the day, they'd at least put the bass and drums down at the same time to get that swing. Yeah. With my band, we've been playing together since '97, so we're pretty tight. And that's how we're able to, I don't think we even had a rehearsal before that session. And got it down. So that helps a lot. Everybody knows the stuff inside and out, but back to my, producing year or two, it was actually while I was at Lunenburg.
Nice.
And some people would come through. I'm like, you're great. I'd love to record you. You're great. I'd love to join your band or whatever. And so I did, the Side Street Nobodies. I did a pal of mine, Amanda Yonka. I did her song, which is incredible. And so many of my songs historically have been very male-centric, which is kind of too bad. I wasn't kind of introduced more to should we say, female aesthetic, audio aesthetic, or I should say lyrical, until, maybe from 07 on. But anyways, the point being that her song was extremely womanly, and I grew from that. I benefited from that. So, but my producing was just demos. I just did demo production.
Yes, but what is it about you? I'm trying to put my finger on it right now, because you said you're a perfectionist, and I know you are, but I often tell musicians, like, stop trying to play every genre, but I would never tell you that because you're very good at it. And what I've heard you do, I love. And like, for example, I was listening to the reggae song just a little while ago. I Do You, or what was that?
I'll do, yeah.
It's good, man. That's a good song. Like, I wasn't expecting it to as good as it was. And I tell musicians all the time, like, I'm telling you, I'm like, you got to focus, you got to zone in, because you're not, I tell people, you're not Prince. You can't play every instrument, but you're a multi-instrument player. And like, what was your first art form? I guess that might help us narrow this down. Were you a painter or a photographer or anything before you were a musician?
I started writing poetry first, and I was an English major at Carleton, but then very quickly started playing guitar and singing. So that's my core art form. But yeah, I played bass, played some keyboards with Dave Norris and Local Ivan. That was maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago. Incredible band, probably the best band other than Brown Paper Bag that I've ever played in, or maybe they're tied. I played some keys with them. I've played some percussion and bass with Danielle Allard, who's incredible. And actually playing bass, like I'd been playing percussion with her for a few years, starting in the Lunenburg years, and then going into the Live on Elgin years, because I play for the Pop Mood there and open mic and so forth, but then moving to bass for like one glorious gig, and playing her stuff on bass. I'm like, these songs are great, and Dean Watson, he's, I think, her main bass player. And so I was playing some of his stuff, but with my own twist, but then some of it I made up myself, and it was challenging and great songwriting. So I really enjoyed that. So bass is my second main instrument. Okay. And if anybody needs a bass player, I'm open to a new project. So just hit me up. Get this guy. He's awesome. Yeah, man. And like, I was asking about other art forms because you're doing what's called a vernissage. Yes.
You're doing a vernissage at Irene's pub, legendary place in this city. Always incredible music in that venue. I only ever got to play there once, but it's a great memory. It was lights out, so it was candle lit, and complete silence for a little bit before, and then it was just me and Ryan, I think. Wow. Just the two of us, him on acoustic. So that's a great memory going back in time. But my friends, the Lionels, love Irene's, and have played some big shows recent years there. I like your story because what I heard about your family telling you that you had to help with the business, and and I think this might, like, were you a rebel? Were you always a badass in this regard, like having to fight back and fight for your right to create?
And also fight for my right to party.
Hell yeah.
Really. Yes, absolutely. Came from a business family where, that's business is the most important thing. And my folks never figured out that, if they're pushing something, telling me to do something and telling me not to do something else, that I'm going to do that something else and not do the something,
Yeah.
They still haven't figured that out. But that's fine. It certainly, helped make me who I am. And I would have done music anyways. I mean, from a very early age, my best buddy growing up, he had older brothers and they had all the 8 tracks. Yeah. I'm dating myself from Gen X.
That's cool though.
So they had the Beatles, they had the Police, they had Supertramp, they had Cheech and Chong. Nice. And on and on and on, all the really great quality stuff. Yeah. And that was, I guess the real beginning of my musical journey. But back to the vernissage, because that's important, because that's ongoing.
Oh, we're
right
going to
now.
keep talking about it.
Cool. So so the vernissage, it's my colorized local historical artwork.
Yes.
So I take photos from, so the earliest photo, source photo in this vernissage is 1863.
Love it.
It's a photo of them building the original center block in Parliament, which burned down in 1916. The Germans burned it down, in my opinion.
Cool. True.
And, goes up until, like basically 1940. So I take black and white photos, I colorize them. I find that kind of brings them to life, but I also write stories about them. So pretty much every image in the vernissage at Irene's, which is on until November 30th, also appears in a story that I wrote, and many stories that I wrote, for Apartment 613 on Ottawa history. So, for example, there's one of an old diner called Bull's Lunch. I wrote a story about Bull's Lunch. I wrote a story about the building of Center Block from the Center Block image. And then there's a couple of breweries. So there's Union Brewery, which used to be on LeBreton Flats. There's a picture of that colorized in the vernissage. Wrote a story about the Union Brewery, Dominion Brewery, as many breweries as I possibly could, basically. So that's, like I say, that's on until November 30th. And we had the launch, a couple of weeks ago. Paul Weber played it. He writes songs about Ottawa history. Like if I were to ever, start writing songs again, I think that's what I'd write about. That would be kind of the most useful thing for me to do as a songwriter if I were to do that. I'm playing mostly covers now, or mostly cover shows, sprinkling in some originals, although the band is jamming again, so hopefully we'll be doing some original shows, particularly with the single coming up.
Yeah, it's wild because one of the very first songs I ever wrote and released, this is before Ryan, this is like the beginning of Ginger Fox, and it was about a murder in town, in Chesterville, that it was unsolved. And I got contacted by some Canadian Historical Society that was like, we're putting this song away for posterity's sake.
Right.
And I was like, what? And it's never happened again. Nothing like that. But I've never really gone back into writing the historical type songs, but it makes me think about like 50 Mission Cap, for example, by, the Hip, and how good the Hip are at writing that style of song, and crafted their career around it. And it's cursed them in the States, but forever blessed them in their community.
I recently read, speaking of the Hip in the States, so they had a big show on SNL. They were finally on SNL, and everybody's like, yeah. And I just read, like on Twitter or whatever, that the guitarist said they were all high out of their mind.
Of course they were. Yeah.
So, maybe they blew it. Maybe that was their big chance, and they, but with their content, maybe they didn't stand a chance anyways.
You're okay, so I want to talk about the pictures and how you got into this Capital History Canada, or Capital History Ottawa.
Capital History Ottawa, yeah.
Colorized.
Yeah.
And you're coloring these photos. Is that a painstaking process?
It is a multi-step process. I don't give away the
secret sauce.
The secret sauce, but a big part of it is researching and finding the images. So I basically follow my interests. So for example, I always wondered, what did it look like downtown when Union Station was an actual functioning rail station?
I love it.
And I had to know, what did it look like, man?
Hell yeah, man.
So, so I found out, and so I've got colorized photos of that, the breweries as well. Stuff like that, just, whatever my interests are. But to what I think your question was, how did I get into it? It started with genealogy, around, I think there was one New Year's, and we're coming up to New Year's now. And so this might be, slightly timely. Around New Year's, everybody has their New Year's resolutions, right? And so, searching on, what's a good New Year's resolution? And it's like, get a new hobby. And at that point, music had become my job. Music was my love and my life. But I mean, technically it was my hobby, but it had become my job. And so I needed a new hobby, started with genealogy, and then that turned into Toronto history, where I'm from. I always knew that I'd eventually make the jump to Ottawa history, which I did when COVID happened.
Yeah.
And so there was lots of time, we weren't really seeing folks so much. So, sitting in front of the computer, researching, colorizing, and then that, 6 months later in 21 turned into the column for Apartment 613. Okay. And, so that's how that all developed.
Very cool. And I saw like the pictures, like you've done articles for other groups. Like I saw you did articles for like Black History as well.
Yep. That was on Apartment 6132. I did do an article about, for the, the Cape Breton Post, which went across Saltwire, which means Halifax Chronicle Herald, and like basically all across the East Coast.
We had a journalist from Saltwire on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So very cool. Yeah.
So it was an alternate news story about how the Blue Nose came to be.
Yeah.
And the Blue Nose story is myth. It's not a myth, it's myth. For Canada, but even more so, 10 times more so for Nova Scotia.
Oh.
And so basically what I was saying was another guy had the same idea or kind of in that range first.
Yeah.
And then these other guys were like, that's a good idea. We're going to run with it. So the notion was controversial. People didn't want to hear anything outside of the myth.
Yeah.
Of, in Nova Scotia. So, So I have written for other outlets as well. That one, maybe some others. A lot of my stuff. So right now I'm actually doing I've wrapped the Apartment 613 series, and now I'm posting my stories to my blog, which is ashleynewall.ca. And this year I've been writing the previously untold history of the Chateau Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a 5-parter. I'm 2 parts in. I'm hoping to get the next 2 parts done next year. But I was very surprised about how much of the stuff that I was finding that was previously unknown.
Wow. How long has the Laugh been there?
1849.
Are you a period drama guy? Are you like a period time? Like, do you like that type of stuff? Westerns, Victorian dramas, anything like? Because I love that stuff. I love it. I'm a theater guy, right? So right. I love it, and I love imagining the people and what was happening, and what you're doing is so cool, man. Because like it brings it to life, and you can like live in that a little more in your imagination, see it for what it was. And so, yeah, I really like it as a period drama. Even I think people who like pirate movies, I think they're into what I'm into as well. It's just history, but presenting what I might call the hype elements of it. But you're showing everything, and it's really gritty but cool.
That's a good word, yeah. Because obviously it was ostensibly an idyllic time. It was certainly a much more innocent time, other than during like World War I, for example.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there were a lot more biases. There were a lot of problems, they didn't have all the medicines that we have now, and so on and so forth. There was a lot more poverty. I find the colorizing really kind of, brings it to your point, brings it to life, and where you can kind of imagine yourself in that scene a little bit.
Very cool. So you're still going full bore with the music, though, at the same time as doing all the capital history stuff.
Yes. And that reminds me. So there was a topic that came up in your Jayla Kirky awesome interview, which I highly recommend everybody check out.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the whole covers versus originals.
Yay. Yes.
Debate.
Yeah.
So obviously, Jayla is, primarily a covers artist. I refer to myself as a top 40 covers artist when I'm, pitching those shows or playing those types of shows. I can and do original shows as well. I said do. Although I haven't done a full original show in a little while. My band has kind of been scattered all over the country, but everybody's in town now, and hopefully it, remains that way for long enough for us to, book an originals show. But the point being, so for example, I was at Barnstorm a couple of years ago, which is an incredible festival.
That's put on by Tick, right?
It's put on by Tick from CKCU. He's got a barn that's just the perfect natural not amphitheater, stage, whatever, place to see a show. It's got, the stage is sort of recessed away. It's got a second floor, to view down onto the stage as well. And I was talking to some folks, and this is a couple of years ago, so this is kind of fresh out of COVID, like that we all haven't maybe socialized as much, and so he was like, so what are you doing? I'm doing just cover shows, Oh, well, I got an original show coming up, my one this year or whatever, like, well, I play once a month or quarterly or whatever, whatever the case may be. But the point being that I felt as though covers, artists were kind of looked down upon maybe by a small segment of the originals gang. Like I said, I play originals as well, but it is an art form unto itself. So starting with the curation, your song selection, and generally, covers artists are choosing songs, or at least the way that I do it, are choosing songs that speak to us. So, Jayla is, like top level in town, obviously, covers artists. And so she's more mindful than I to what's going to get the crowd going, song after song after song after song. Whereas I'm playing a little bit more stuff that appeals to me.
Okay.
Which I hope will appeal to the audience. Over the course of a 3-set night in a pub, she's playing clubs. I play pubs now. Like I played clubs with Brown Paper Bag. But then, you're performing, that's inherently an art form. And one of the great things about being a covers artist is you don't have to promo as much. You're going to a bar where there's already people, they haven't had to pay to get in. Yeah, you can tell folks, some friends might show up. I found when I was playing every single week, it was sort of a supply and demand thing. It was tough to get and I was also playing in the outskirts.
Is that where it comes from? Is it jealousy? Is it that original bands are looking and saying they're just getting built-in audiences because they play popular music? Do you think it's like a jaded thing?
I don't know.
See, we can comment because we do both. I always include 3 covers per 7 originals, basically. So there's always a good number of changing covers in our set. And it's important to re-energize the crowd, to re-meet the crowd with something familiar, because nostalgia is a huge thing in music. It's maybe the biggest thing. You really need to trigger that nostalgia in some capacity, and sometimes our own songs just don't get it done. But yeah, I think what happens is because I also, in music, bigger bands look down on smaller bands, and bands will often say, why? Why won't, it's funny. So sometimes bands will say, why won't you book us? Why won't you play a show with us? And the answer is always the same, right? Because we're trying to play for a bigger band, just like you are. It's no different. We're just trying to be an opening band like you are. It's just the same story. And also, you're one of the people who taught me this. You should only be playing Ottawa how many times a year if you're an original band? And 2-3 times a year, right? Yeah. You took us out, taught us that. So I fully believe that and tell other bands this now. And whether they listen to me or not, they don't. But it's true. And if you wear your crowd out, then, So what I tell young bands who are like, why do bigger bands look down? The answer is not as nefarious as people might think. The answer is investment. That's it. Bigger bands have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars in their career, and most of them are in debt still.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. The whole record deal thing.
Yeah.
Is basically the record label is a bank.
Correct.
And they're saying, sign here and we will loan you $100,000, which you will then have to pay back.
Yes.
That's basically, what it is.
And so these people become jaded and they hate the industry and they hate what is going on and they hate seeing little bands.
I saw a jaded band a couple months ago.
Of course. And they hate seeing bands think they're going to rise by being good. They, when you meet a band and they're talented and they're like, we're going to go places because we're talented. And they're right. They are going to move and see cool scenes and advance. But the big jaded band who's in this scenario is looking and they're just going like, frig off. Like, you don't have the gall or the guts. It's like the actor who goes to LA and sacrifices everything, Michael J. Fox, when he's 15 years old. I mean, God knows what happened to that kid to make him rise to the stardom level that he did. But what I tell people is the sacrifice is obvious. And the more we hear about Hollywood now, the uglier it is. And the uglier the sacrifices have become since Harvey Weinstein was revealed. And I tell people, well, he's the one.
Well, no, I know about that. Yeah.
Right. But you don't know anything about what stuff?
Well, no, just in Hollywood. There's just the whole Hollywood.
It's the same as Toronto. It's no different than going to a big market. It's just a big market. And it's the epic market.
Right.
Right? It's the epicenter. Yeah. And so you go there to swim with the big fish.
Yeah.
So Post Malone gave up everything, left it all behind, went and lived in LA and was a nobody. And people thought he was a nut bar.
Right.
And because of that sacrifice, somebody gave him everything. And this is this thing where people say, I signed a deal with the devil. Bob Dylan, whoever it might be. It means that you have signed off on a great sacrifice. That's what that is referring to.
I mean, for how many Post Malones have gone to Hollywood and not made it?
Almost all of them.
99,000.
Almost all of them.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy. And he's super talented. I mean, obviously.
Incredibly so.
He's and we could talk about current music if you like, just in terms of where it's at, or we could come back to that. But
I just wanted to comment on that dynamic of bands not seeing eye to eye. You know what I mean?
Right,
even in genres, they don't see eye to eye. I had Niana here, who's a country up-and-coming superstar, and she's going to Nashville for 3 months at a time to work with writers, to learn, to be mentored, to figure out what's going on at that level.
Right.
And so when I hear about that, I just, I love it. Yes, Ottawa's amazing, but follow your dreams, folks, and don't settle for anything. Just go for it, grab it, and find those people, because it's so invigorating.
You know what? Getting back to the covers thing. So with covers, you can actually make a living. I've done it. It's taxing. It's a lot of late nights and a lot of free beer.
Does it steal the joy? Period. That's my question. Does it steal the joy of music from the performer?
No.
When I worked in television, it stole the joy. I no longer could watch TV. I no longer could enjoy it the same way. The magic was gone. And so I feel that once you dig into something enough, you can steal the joy from yourself. So I got out of that. I wanted nothing to do with that anymore. I wanted to be able to watch a movie again and not think about lighting technique. So I just, as far as cover bands go, there again, that's my thought. Also, you have the rebel in the artist, the rebellion artist. I'm not that. I didn't rebel till my 20s. So what I am is a purist. I was in dance class when I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Jazz, tap, ballet. So I was already learning. There's masters. There's mentors. There's this type of thing, right? So whereas if you're a rebel, it's this. I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I don't care how I'm going to get there. Johnny Cash. So there's no right way. There is no correct way. It's just your way, right?
Well, yeah, I did it my way for sure. The whole go for it in originals music thing. Like I said, like in the early 90s, everybody was getting signed. So it was working for a minute, And now, how much in debt those bands got. Obviously a few of them, had a lot of success. But just playing is fun. And so, speaking of the early 90s, there's the Odds. Now, I think they were coming up maybe starting in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
They were a covers band. That's how they made their dough. I recently learned that Platinum Blonde, which was the first concert I ever saw in my life, and this is predictable if you know their music, they were a Police covers band. So, which is why I love them so much, because I love the Police. I mentioned my buddy's brothers with their 8-track tapes. And the Beatles were a covers band, and that's how they made their money. So, so I encourage people to play covers, in terms of if you're going to play like 3-4 times a week, the key is to not drink alcohol. So unless you have a constitution,
right,
that can handle it, which I don't.
Right.
So I was pretty burned out after 5 years of 8 years of full-time music, but 5 years of full-time cover stuff. I was ready to drop, when COVID hit. So, COVID kind of saved me that way. And I took some time off, and then I got back at it, a year or two later or whatever. So, so the originals thing, like do what you got to do out there, like if you gotta pursue the originals thing, then do it.
God,
maybe have a side job so you can afford the recording.
How can people, like, the thing is, like, JLD's talent is extreme. It's awesome. The range is vast in the vocals, and gosh, it's really awesome to see. And the cover bands you're referring to, like your own, like Brown Paper Bag, we're talking about like high level talent. We're not talking about general cover bands here. Not in my opinion.
Oh,
okay?
that was
in my opinion, we're referencing like the creme de la creme of cover bands with artists who, in my opinion, like Skylar Radmore, like, holy cow, man. Like, some of the talent on these people is just oozing out of them. And so by no means do I mean any disrespect. I can't do it, just like it sucks the joy from me. That's just me. And so I get off on improv. I get off on creativity.
That's a good point. Maybe some people that's their musical journey that they're on is doing their own stuff. For like as a songwriter, learning other people's songs, you can then like steal.
Well, that's what a producer does, is they know a whole genre of music.
Right.
And then they go, well, wait a minute. What you're doing there? Let me play you this. This is Rival Sons. Yeah, listen to this. Same thing, but they did this. Whoop, 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 whoop. And, so that's what I like about the game is teamwork. I love getting into the studio as a team and working and crunching and like working on those lyrics. Like, I don't know. Like you said, you're a perfectionist. So do you let anybody touch your lyrics? Do you let anybody have a say at all on what you write?
I was a perfectionist.
Okay.
In music. I'm trying to shake that off because it elongated, for example, the editing process in the studio at like $30 an hour, $50 an hour, whatever the heck it was. And as well, it was counterproductive.
Yeah, I hear that. You have hosted open mics over the years as well, like you were talking about, and you were mentioning Live on Elgin, and I just wanted to touch on them being, that's a great venue. And I tell people all the time, like young bands, like, go sell it out. Go sell out the Cuff. Those need to be your first 2 stops. Go sell out those smaller venues. Do it 2-3 times. And the reason I say that is that's what Taming Sorry did. And if you go into Live on Elgin, I'm always proud we're one of those lucky bands who has our set list framed up on the wall. And it's one of the proudest things I have in the whole city is because that was a sold out night. And when they brought that over and said, we're putting this up on the wall, it was like, that meant so much. It's like getting your signed picture on a restaurant wall or whatever, you know, like, and so I love John. And I love that venue. And Ginger Fox reached out to John previous to him setting up that. Well, he was in the process of setting it up.
Yeah.
John drove all the way out to the boonies to Stittsville to this shitty barn that we were recording in. And we wanted like a 150-year-old barn. It was cool. It was cool. But still, the mice were living there. And we showed him and he was like, okay, yeah, you're going for it. And, you know, again, it wasn't naivety, but there was a great energy that we had going back then, you know, that you can get going with a band. And sometimes your route is so your own. Like, that's what I always would come back to. There's what we think, and then there's your own journey. And that's really all we can go for.
Well, John's obviously another community guy. I mean, he's working his butt off to support the Ottawa music community. You know, I hosted open mic there with Jim McDowell. That quickly turned into the show on Rogers TV, which I did for a year, live on Elgin open mic, which was super cool. And now we've got like a video record of all this stuff, which is cool. Some of it's on my YouTube page. You know, and then Play for the Pot started back up there as well. So yeah, I hosted actually probably in about 10 or 12 different places over the years.
Yeah.
Starting at the Georgetown pub and you know, most of them don't exist anymore. I've got an upcoming gig. So I hosted open mic at Quinn's, around 2012, I guess. And I'm playing Quinn's on January the 11th with John Allaire. It's the John Allaire show. I was just there on Saturday. It was incredible. Tara Holloway was playing. And like, I wasn't expecting like to have like the shoes like blown off my feet. And the two of them were incredible.
Yeah.
And it's a teeny tiny little room, which is great for intimacy. Like when you're playing, like people are sitting watching and listening. So I'm playing that show on Saturday, January the 11th with John Allaire at Quinn's Pub in Old Ottawa South.
Legends. Everybody needs to get out to that. That's going to be wicked.
It's every Saturday as well. I can't recall who's coming up, but January 11th.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tara Holloway, and it's like it's another powerhouse, like just, you know. And I remember again going back all the way back 12, 11 years ago. She was a powerhouse, you know. And again, this is what I tell people: it doesn't matter what you're doing. It's like my story about the Damn Truth. They're epic. They're an amazing rock band. They're playing over in England right now. And it took them a long time to get there. They had to work very hard. 12 years ago, I opened for them at Zaphod's. And, you know, we barely had anybody in the club. And 12 years later, we were at Brass Monkey and it was sold out. So, you know, it's a wild ride with ups and downs and you just don't know where you're going to go. Let me ask you about, where should we go next? Vintage beer. You make your own vintage beer?
No, I sell vintage beer posters.
Oh, I thought you had sold vintage beer. Oh, and Canadiana posters.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is kind of part and parcel with the colorized local historical works. It's a hobby, something I do for fun. You know, and I know the various archives to go to find the images. So there's, you know, I've got magazine covers from the 1900s, the 1910s, back before the magazine covers had photos. They had to draw them. Yeah. And like people like Tom Thompson were doing the drawings
to make money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, it was just, the artwork is incredible. And it harkens back to a much more innocent time. And then there's ads from those same magazines. There's a specific magazine. I can't recall what it's called offhand, but, you know, and I enjoy beer, you know, I enjoy specific beers specifically. And, so I started looking for beer posters thinking, maybe my buddies would enjoy that kind of stuff. I enjoy that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm selling that kind of stuff, on the side, basically. I was going to do a Shopify store, and then I was finally like, no, that's too much work. I'm just going to, I plan actually on selling that specific stuff at shows.
Yeah.
Particularly at original shows that, have some merch to sell and, very affordable prices, and it's like super cool stuff that you're not going to see anywhere else.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I'm going to come to the vernissage. Absolutely.
Sweet.
Because I want to pick up one of these Canadiana posters and put it up behind me. It's going to look wicked. Bluesfest. You've done Bluesfest, Junofest, Jazzfest. I really want to pick your brains a bit here. So let's talk about the Bluesfest. What was the first time you did Bluesfest?
I think I've only done it once.
Oh, what the heck? Okay. Damn.
No. I've done it twice. I did a side stage the second time with, that would have been with, Danielle Allard.
Okay. Wicked.
On percussion.
God, one of the top talents again. It's just huge, massive talent.
Yeah. She's incredible.
Yeah.
And then I played it with my own band. At the time we were called, I think we were the Ashley Newall band in 2011. And then we became Ashley Newall and the Raging Suburbanites.
That's what I got written there. I couldn't read Suburbanite. Yep, that's it.
And then I did Jazzfest with Lisa Fowler and the Prowlers.
Oh, cool.
It might have been Danielle with Jazzfest and Lisa Bluesfest. Yeah, that was probably it. Junofest.
Yes.
That was really interesting because it's more niche. It's more infrequent, and it's the Junos.
Yeah.
And so I played that with Dave Norris and Local Ivan, incredible band. Dean Watson's brother, Tim Watson, was on drums for that band. But the main driver was Dave Norris, who is an incredible talent, and he could have made it. I'm not sure if he was interested in making it.
Right.
He was able to record his own stuff extremely well. That was the band I was on keys with. And we played Junofest. I think, if I remember correctly, the guy from Junk House, his son's band from Hamilton, can't remember what they were called, but they were hot at the time. This is again around 2011.
Okay.
I think we opened for them type thing. I think that was the Junofest show that we played. So Dave Norris, his whole thing was getting cool opening slots.
Huh.
I don't know if we ever got like more than 5 or 10 people out to the shows. And I think we were there to, Dave in particular was there to be cool and add to the whole cool vibe of the show for the headliner. And so that was the wave that he was on. And so we played some incredible shows to like huge crowds that we didn't assemble ourselves. But Junofest was, that was a really special one.
Cool, man. Bluesfest was just so wicked. Just such a wicked experience. Top to bottom.
Yeah.
Even like anything that you might perceive as negative, I still look at as like freaking awesome. Like, for example, one of my guitar players, he didn't hear the sound man when the sound man was like turned down. And so how's that sound man going to deal with that? He's a pro. He just turns them off.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Can you, and I was like, oh, that's wicked. I love that. Like, when you meet people with that next level knowledge and they just throw it down like that, and you're like, because I'm yelling at Joe, like, Joe, listen to him, and he's like, he can't hear anything. He's like,
that's lead guitar.
Always guitars are the bane of my existence. Oh yes, guitars are the bane of the lead singer's existence. Let me tell you, folks, because they just keep cranking it up.
Right. Yeah. This is true. It's the nature of the beast.
Right. And, but I love them because they give me breaks. I love them because they give me breaks. I get to go back to the drummer and hang out and have a fun moment, and not worry too much while they solo.
Oh, speaking of which, there's no guitar solos anymore. Eh? It's all, for the last 10 years, 12 years, 14 years, whatever. It's all, rap breaks, bring back the guitar solo. I say into the top 40 pop song.
I've done all I could do. When it comes to keeping solos. I don't think we have a song without one. So you know what I mean? It's like we've done all we can for solos.
And the key to solos is the George Harrison way. Like, can you sing it?
Gosh.
Can you hum it? It's got to have a melody. And you know, obviously George's solos were the best, and he wasn't like, you know, he was you know, doing a melody unto itself.
Ah, George is a special dude.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, again, like, people don't get the right. Sometimes you can watch video of him on YouTube in his later years, and he seems pissed. And I don't think it's that he's pissed. It's just like people have a missed warped.
Drunk?
No, angry. Like, sorry, that was a bad word. He just seems grumpy in some of the later videos. And I think it's because they keep asking him about John, and they keep asking him about Paul. And he keeps having to tell them they weren't that friggin' nice to me. They kept making my life difficult. They kept making sure my solos and my songs didn't come about, you know? So I feel like George had to be twice as good. If he didn't, you know, nothing he did would cut through. If Clapton doesn't walk into the room.
You know what? When we're younger in bands, like, we're dumb like that. You know, like, they were in their 20s. You know,
it was only 7 years or something, right? Like, for them total, like
10, I guess. With, like, you know, before Ringo was 7 years.
Yeah,
but you know, like, they were, you know, obviously, you know, Ringo and Paul know damn well that George is one of the giants of all time. Now, you know, when they're in their 20s, they're like, we're the songwriters who,
yeah.
You
well, he was the young one.
What's this little while my guitar gently weeps?
Yeah,
you know, like. Yeah, and I mean, for that he had to bring in Clapton to get them to wake up and actually try. But speaking of George Harrison, so it sounds like you're a fan. So Taming Sorry, that name sounds a little bit East Indian to me.
Oh yeah, well, it's from Malaysia, so it's Malaysian.
Okay, because it made me think of George's, you know, Indian influenced songs, which I loved, and that style. But anyways, that's an aside.
Oh, cool. Taming Sorry translates to flower shield, and it was
nice.
It was a sacred Chris, the real Taming Sorry, because we're just the band Taming Sorry, but the Chris would make the user float on air, and it was called an Invincible. And it was bejeweled and everything. And it was called Flower Shield because, like, you know, the blood splurting all over the place, you know? So I was like, whoa, that's just cool. And, like, I knew nothing about it when I was reading it. So I was just like, it'd be cool. That's a cool story. People should know that. And just, even if they found my band and they Google it and they see that that's what Taming Sorry is, it's like, kind of like Excalibur. You know what I mean? But it's like, people just don't know about it. And we've had a lot of sorries over the years message us with the exact same message. So I can message them back a screenshot of those messages. And they all say, so you think you can tame me? So you think that sorry can be tamed? I'm like, God, no. Hell no. We would never be so bold. Hell, absolutely not, you know?
It's a juxtaposition.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you so much, Ashley. I mean, people need to get out to this vernissage at Irene's. It's going on till November 30th.
Yep.
And you're there between what hours?
I'll be there on November 30th next, between 12 and 3. CA and Sunny are playing between 1 and 3. And they are, in my view, one of the best musical acts in town. Very enjoyable, and just super chill. And I highly recommend people check them out. They play every Saturday, but I'll be there on the 30th, 12 to 3.
Amazing. And what about your show that was coming up again? That was in January?
January 11th at Quinn's Pub in Old Ottawa South.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll put links below for your website and everything you want people to find. So people go and check out Ashley's work and go to Irene's Pub and check it out. It's really cool. You're one of the coolest dudes in the city, in my opinion, and like one of the best hosts I've encountered over 15 years or so.
Wow.
One of the best hosts, man, like when it came to events. And
Well, thank you.
And
yeah, I really enjoy doing that.
And your events were beneficial. And not many, it's not always that way. Events are not always beneficial for bands. I found yours helpful.
Cool.
So
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, man.
That was the point. Yeah.
Keep being Ashley Newall, because I think you're a badass.
Well, thank you.
And I think everyone who knows you thinks you're a badass. So don't forget that.
Kind of need to say thank you.
Hell yeah. And thank you for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast.
Yes.
Yeah.
And thank you for watching out there. And we'll see you all again next time on All Worn Out. Bye-bye, everybody.